Hey guys, did you know that I have a Patreon where you can support me and plus get awesome rewards? Or if you're thinking to yourself, but Julian, I want even more bang for my buck while still supporting you, you can pop over to my Redbubble and check out my awesome store with new designs appearing regularly. But for now, enjoy the video you're about to watch. Hey guys, it's me, Julian Greystoke. Today I'm wearing this sweater because I was too lazy to take it off to film. This is the kind of quality product that you tune in for. So today we are going to be talking about a book that was written by another author-tuber and self-published. Yes, I do follow this author-tuber. Her name is Megan Tennant, and I love her videos very much. Her book is called Aletheia, and before we begin, I just want to make it clear that any criticisms that I have for her book are not criticisms of her. I shouldn't have to say this, but I do have to say this. I'm just talking about her book as a critic, not as someone who's trying to call her out, not as someone who's trying to be an asshole towards her. And from what I've seen of Megan, she seems like a very cool, level-headed person, so I think she can take it. So just be calm, guys. She's a grown woman. She can handle herself if she watches this video. So let's talk about her book. This book took me a really long time to read, and I feel really bad about that. That's mostly my fault because I bought it on the Kindle store for my phone because I don't own a Kindle or a tablet or anything like that. So I was reading it on my phone, which is the #1 worst way for me to read anything. This is a lesson that I have learned. Anyway, what is Aletheia about before we continue? So Aletheia is a dystopian story that has a fairly similar feel to some other dystopians I have read, where we have the haves and have-nots. The have-nots being separated do most of the labor and live very regimented lives, but occasionally they do get to leave their protected walled city and go out to scavenge for things. And one of the people who is allowed to go out and scavenge is our main character. She doesn't have a name, she has a number. Her name is 736 or 736, I'm not sure which way you're supposed to say it. And I often couldn't remember her number because the story is in first person, so it's only said very occasionally, and someone would say it and I'd be like, wait, which one's 736? Oh, it's her. 736 goes out into the ruins scavenging for things, and when she is there, she finds a rather dishy boy and discovers a plan to potentially escape the servitude that she lives under in her walled city place sanctuary thing. I'm doing a great job of explaining this. And that's basically the book, is convincing herself and her fellows that they want to escape and then finally actually escaping. So because it took me so long to read this book, my notes are all over the place and hopefully they will make sense. I apologize if they don't make a lot of sense. One thing that I will say is, yes, reading this book on my phone is the absolute worst way for me to read a book. However, I might have been more motivated to get back to it if it had interested me more. I felt like this story was very slow, especially for a dystopian that promised to be so, like, exciting and energized. And everyone, the reviews that I was reading were like, it's so exciting, mile a minute, and it never really got going for me until the very end. So honestly, it was hard to motivate myself to read it because it was on my phone, and also hard to motivate myself to read it because nothing was happening. I did like the way this story first began, the way it picked up, did a really good job, in my opinion, of getting the exposition of this world out of the way while following this character. I'm not a huge fan of following a character through their daily routine to get a feel for their world, but in this case it actually worked for me. Until she got to the dining hall and she sat down with her friend. And then the problems with the characterization really kind of started, because other than arguably our main character and maybe her love interest, everybody kind of just has one personality type. Like, her friend who she talks to, who I call exposition friend in my head, just sat down and rather than having a natural flowing conversation, they just kind of spouted exposition at each other. But yeah, like I said, most of the characters felt pretty one note to me. There's the one who likes to burn things, the one who only has one arm that she feels guilty about, her female friend who is just good and pure as the driven snow. And I like characters who feel a little deeper than that. 736 herself was deeper, but for me, her main motivation didn't really work to keep me engaged. 736 feels guilty. She feels fucking hella guilty about just about everything. And some people might not mind guilt as a motivation for a character, but I wasn't really into it. For me personally, I like a character who wants something, who drives for something, and I never really felt like 736 was doing anything because she wanted to. It definitely felt a lot more like she was doing it because she felt guilty and felt like she had to. There were quite a few dystopian tropes in this book. That's another thing that bothered me a little bit. The advertising for this book claims that it is so original and so unlike any other dystopians that you will read. In reality, it's a pretty average dystopian. I mean, if you like dystopians, you probably like this too, but coming into it with the expectation that it's going to blow your mind and be a dystopian unlike you've ever read before will leave you feeling pretty disappointed, kind of like I was. I was really expecting, with all of the talk, that it was going to blow my mind, but I read a lot of dystopians and this was very average. That's not to say it was bad, it just didn't stand out. Some of the things that didn't stand out were, of course, the haves and the have-nots, as you often have, the kind of system that they were under, ruled by this sort of shadowy king guy, prophet dude, whose motivations are tenuous at best. And of course, at the beginning of the book, somebody stands up and explains their world, just like we're at the beginning of the Hunger Games, or really any other kind of dystopian book where some person in authority is like, and this is why the world is the way it is. And I really wish that it could have been woven in a lot more naturally. Of course, our main character is the strong, independent woman of most dystopians, and she goes out to find things and encounter the zombies. They're not really zombies. They're depraved, I think is what they're called. They're zombie-like, which obviously earns some points from me because I am a fan of zombies, and I do kind of like what was done with them. It wasn't quite your classic zombies. There was a twist on it, which I enjoyed. I wish it had been delved into deeper. Possibly it will be in the second book. So she's going out there into the world, and as I was following her, I was convinced that she had absolutely no training, which could be true. But then why would they send these people out into the world to scavenge if they have no training? It felt like she was supposed to be this badass, and she kind of just failed and bumblefucked her way through every situation. And I understand that you don't want your character to feel too perfect, but I also feel like she should be convincingly okay at her job. Of course, she was also a female lead who had been assaulted, sexually assaulted, and otherwise assaulted in her past, which is again something that we have seen so many times, and her flashbacks and PTSD were okay. Again, I have written down the exposition is oppy, especially when it's in dialogue. I think it just comes down to practice. As this author practices writing more and more, as more and more of her books come out, she will get better at getting the exposition out there more smoothly. Because I do remember when I was reading, every time the exposition would come up in dialogue, it would feel very exposition-y to me. And I would be like, sit back kids, we're going to talk about the world now. And I know a lot of people advise you to put exposition into dialogue. That is advice that I have heard a lot. But you can't do it always. And that is a problem with a lot of advice that's going around in the bookish circles right now, and maybe I'll do a video about it. Just relying on dialogue to get your exposition across gets real clunky real fast. Again, I'm just kind of reading my notes as I took them. I wrote, yeesh, everyone wants to abuse this girl, male guards, female guards. She lives to just be abused by everyone, which again makes her a little bit of a cliche to me. I have sympathy for a character who has a hard life, but once their life reaches a certain threshold of difficultness, I start to tune out. It's a tough calibration to get, but I can't have a character who's just in a constant state of being abused, or I kind of get desensitized to it and it doesn't matter to me anymore. Maybe that makes me an asshole, but we already knew that I was an asshole, so. Of course, with all of that abuse, we have the abuse makes me strong trope, which is one that I really don't like. Quite a while ago, I made a video about writing sexual assault in your book, and I talked about how assault should not be used as a way to show that a character is strong now. I don't know that this book does it, like, exclusively, but it does rely on the abuse made me strong kind of trope, and I'm just not a fan. Okay, we talked a little bit about the fact that most people have numbers, and some of them have numbers and nicknames, and I had a little bit of trouble at times, especially with the numbers, and I will admit that some of that is me. I have trouble with numbers in general. I'm dyscalculic? I don't know how to say it. Dyslexic, but with numbers, so having characters that have numbers for names was really not working for me, but other people might not mind it so much. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit more about, like, the main character. You know how I mentioned she feels like she's doing everything just out of a sense of guilt? This book, part of the reason that I had so much trouble picking it back up is I never felt the urgency. In many dystopians, you come to feel this deep urgency, this we need to escape, we need to get out of this horrible situation, help, I'm in the Hunger Games, this is not good. In this one, I never felt the main character's desire or need to escape. She always seemed pretty accepting of the world she was in. I never really felt that necessary defiance from her to feel like she wanted or needed to escape this place. Near the beginning of the story, we get a new captain, and I'm like, okay, this captain is going to be the thing that spurs her on into needing to leave. But the captain, I felt like, kind of got very much forgot about until near the end of the book. And she didn't really matter or come up that much until the end of the book. And I was like, okay, well, what is going to spur our character to desire or need to leave? And then she met a cute boy in the ruins, and he thinks that they need to leave, and so she's like, he's hot. I guess if he thinks we should go, we should go. Cool, I'll help him with his plan. For a while, we are kind of falling into these beats of she goes back to the compound, she goes out and talks to Hot Boy, she goes back to the compound and goes out and talks to Hot Boy. I would have personally liked it if we had a little bit more action going on in some of that, just to keep the story feeling like it was rolling. The world never felt all that dangerous. I don't know, maybe I'm not articulating it well, probably not, but that's just, I'm reading my notes, guys. Blame past me. As we get into the more escalating portion of the book and our heroes are starting to try to escape and, like, doing some sabotage and subterfuge and stuff like that, it still lacks urgency for me. People we don't care about are getting hurt or killed, but we don't care about them. So we're like, so-and-so got hurt doing that thing. Yeah, well, who cares? This book is a lot more romancy, at least at certain parts, than I had hoped. Near the end, the romance just kind of goes away, and subsequently that's when I got more into it. But if you are more into romance, you might be more into this book. I prefer my dystopian to have, like, a romantic subplot, but not as much of the main plot. And there is a section of this book that is pretty heavily on the romance, and I just didn't care. There's even a bitchy girl who comes in to try and break our main character and Jason, aka Hot Guy, up. And it was just like, oh my gosh. Can we fight some zombies, please? Please and thank you. I wrote down, it took until chapter 30 for both me and the main character to decide that the situation was really serious. Exposition friend was threatened. And I found myself wishing that I cared about it because I loved his character and not because the main character did. Exposition friend he really felt like a wasted opportunity to make a real feeling friendship. I bought her friendship with Rose, the other girl, the pure as the driven snow one. But I did not buy her friendship with Exposition friend at all. There were never any moments that felt like they were pure just friendship moments. It was all just her feeling guilty about an injury that he had, and him spouting exposition. So the romantic rival, we're just backing up to the romantic rival. She confused me. I wasn't 100% certain why she was in the book, other than to, like, throw a little monkey wrench into their romance. And also I was confused by a lot of things about her. Like, she's really bitchy, and she's also, like, small and frail, and it's implied it's because she's led such, like, a charmed life, but I'm like, doesn't she lead a hard life out in the ruins? Like, doesn't she have to haul water and lift and carry? And maybe it's because she was supposed to be, like, sheltered because she was special, but her character just confused me. I was confused why the zombie sickness made you lose your memory, and so does the cure for the zombie sickness. I think that might be a plot point that comes up in later books, but right now I was like, and maybe I was supposed to be like, So that might not necessarily be a criticism. Okay, we're just going to stop right here and talk about some of the representation in this book. This book does have some queer characters, which is good. Our main character is bisexual. It doesn't really come up too much in the story, but it's there and it's nice, and she's sort of incidentally bisexual, and she has an ex-girlfriend and all of this stuff. I liked it. It's good. However, I found out through watching the author's YouTube channel, her talking about this book, that other characters are asexual. And it made me sad because the ace characters in this book are still pretty invisible. So I don't remember who the asexual character is supposed to be, but I never got that they were asexual while reading the book, and that made me really sad because ace rep is my jam. But hey, maybe it'll be more explicit in the next book, provided that that character didn't die. I can't remember, because I don't remember which one they were supposed to be. I wrote, none of their plans make sense to me, and a lot of them seem super luck-based. Just in general, all of their sabotage plans and whatnot seem like they're just like, we're gonna do this thing. And then it just happens to work out in this really sort of Rube Goldberg-y way, and everything's okay. Toward the end, the main character was making a really big stink about killing and trying not to kill, and then she shoots someone in the head and gets one sentence of a reaction before she just moves on. If you're gonna have your character make a big deal about not wanting to kill, then don't have them shoot someone in the head and just barely notice and move on. The climax of this book, I will say, was pretty exciting. There's just like this fucking brutality just appeared out of nowhere. People were getting horrifyingly killed, and I was like, well, damn, where was this the rest of the book? If the rest of the book was like this, I would have changed my tune. I would have been so on board. Like, the ending, I didn't know if it was worth slogging through the rest of the book for me, but the ending did hold my attention, and even the parts that confused me, I was willing to forgive. I easily predicted the characters that were going to live and the ones that were going to die, which is another disappointing part because, again, in the advertising for this book, we are promised that, like, the character shields don't exist. None of your favorites are safe. And I knew exactly who was going to live and who was going to die. And finally, my last criticism before I talk about good things, there were things that I liked, don't worry. My last criticism is that often dystopians, I was listening to someone else talking about dystopians and how dystopians often hold up a dark mirror to our world right now. Like the Hunger Games, where it kind of took this obsession with reality TV and pushed it to the next level. And so, some of the best dystopians do that. They take something in our lives right now, push it to the extreme, and it really lets us think and process and go, recognize that and go, that could be us. And I'm not saying that every dystopian needs to do that, but some of the best ones do. And unfortunately, this book doesn't really at all. There's really nothing in this book that allowed me to hold up that mirror to our world and go, oh, if we don't watch out, we could be in that situation too. Like, maybe it was trying to make a little bit of a point about health care and how health care is reserved for the wealthy, but if it was, it got lost under a whole pile of other things. So, and that made this not only a pretty average dystopian, but one that really didn't have a lot to say. Okay, one more thing, I lied. There are some really odd sentences in this book. Not very many, and they are dispersed throughout, but just some odd ones. Like, he shrugged symmetrically. I think you need to point out if he shrugged asymmetrically, but not if he shrugged symmetrically. Shrugs are generally assumed to be both shoulders. I like, a blush assaulted my face. I have never thought of a blush assaulting anything. And finally, unnamed muscles in my chest weave a slimy tapestry. What does that even mean? Okay, so by now I'm sure you are all sick of my shit and want to know if there was anything that I frickin' liked about this book. Yeah, there were. The writing, aside from some odd phrasing from time to time, was structurally pretty good as far as just the craft went. Definitely a nice break from Jenna Moressi's Eve the Awakening. If you're interested in seeing me tear that one apart, links in the doobly-doo. So as far as writing and just the craft of writing, other than a few awkward moments, this book was pretty good. I did like some of the characters. I liked the character of Rose well enough. She was just pretty precious, but she was alright. And I, of course, really like the character of Arson, who doesn't come up until later in the book, but I could definitely feel like the author liked him a lot too, and I have heard that he's going to be a main character in the next book, so I can tell that my love for him and the author's love for him were kind of on the same track. And like I said, I thought our main character was okay. And if you don't mind that she's motivated primarily by guilt and feeling like she has to do things, you'll probably like her. I feel like if this book hadn't overhyped it with the marketing that it was so original and unlike any dystopian you've read before, I might not have been quite so disappointed with this book. Also, I know a lot of people, while they find the beginning to be a little bit slow, do get into it a whole lot sooner than I do, so maybe if I wasn't reading this on my phone, I would have been into it at about the same time everyone else got into it. And like I said, that ending was pleasantly brutal. I loved watching all of the gore and the death and the interesting deaths. And like I said, even when I was a little confused sometimes, I was like, I'm still on board, because people be dying in fun and creative and splattery ways. So there you go, those are my thoughts, my long-winded thoughts on Aletheia. Have you read it? Comment below and let me know what you thought. I am still trying to do indie authors when I can. I don't have a lot of time for just sitting down to read. And if you are sitting there and feeling super salty right now because I just insulted your favorite book or your favorite indie author, I recommend that you go ahead and check out my self-published book, Phoenix, and, you know, I don't know, do your own video and tear it a new one. Please read it first, but otherwise, go to town. As most of you know, I post new videos here Mondays and Fridays. All the links to my social media are in the doobly-doo for ease of clicking. And if you liked what you saw here for some reason, but you wish it was higher quality, and I don't blame you, you can support me on my Patreon, where I am slowly saving up to purchase better equipment. And I will see all of you again next time with whatever it is I happen to be doing next time. Bye! What's up, everybody? It is shout out time. Time to shout out to my very first patron, Kim. And if you want to be cool like Kim, become a patron over on Patreon.